$300,000 sitting in a brokerage account is the exact moment most investors quietly sabotage themselves, and they have no idea they're doing it. Because here's what the math actually says. If you stop contributing a single dollar at $300,000 and you just let it sit in a basic index fund earning 8% a year, that account becomes over $2 million in 25 years. No new money, no genius stock picks, no timing the market. Just time doing the heavy lifting while you do absolutely nothing. But almost nobody sees that $2 million because somewhere between $250,000 and $400,000, something psychological flips in the human brain that causes people to either yank money out, panic sell during the next dip, or quietly stop trusting the process. And that's what I want to show you today. I'm Joe, and this is the second compound phase, the one almost everyone quits before it pays off. Let's start with the actual mechanics, because if you don't see the numbers clearly, none of the psychology stuff later will hit the way it should. Compound growth doesn't happen in a straight line, it happens in phases. And there are basically three of them. Phase 1 is the grind. This is when you're going from zero to about $100,000. It feels brutal. Your contributions are doing almost all the work. The market gains feel tiny, and every dip feels like it wipes out months of progress. Charlie Munger famously said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it." He wasn't being dramatic, he was describing real math. Phase 2, and this is the one nobody talks about, is the awkward middle. Roughly $100,000 to about $500,000. The market is now generating real money on its own. A 10% year on $300,000 is $30,000, which might be more than you can contribute from your salary. But here's the catch. A 20% drop on $300,000 is $60,000 gone in a few weeks. The dollar swings get violent, and your emotions get violent with them. Phase 3 is the autopilot phase. This is when your portfolio is so large that compounding completely takes over. Your money is making more money than you ever could from working. This is the phase that turns $500,000 into $2 million, then $2 million into $5 million, seemingly out of nowhere. Now here's the data point that should make you sit up. Fidelity ran an internal study a few years back looking at which of their accounts had the best returns over time. The winners weren't day traders, they weren't even active investors. They were the accounts belonging to people who had either forgotten they had the account or who had literally died and the estate hadn't been settled yet. Dead investors beat live ones because they couldn't touch it. Vanguard's own research backs this up. Their Advisor Alpha study found that the average investor underperforms the funds they own by about 1.5 to 2 percentage points per year, purely because of behavioral mistakes. Buying high, selling low, tinkering when they should be sitting still. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact mental model I use to stay glued to my seat in phase 2, because that's the phase where every dollar of behavioral mistake costs you the most. Stick with me. So why does phase 2 break so many people? Why does $300,000 specifically feel like a psychological cliff? This is where the research gets really interesting. There's a concept in behavioral finance called loss aversion, first formalized by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979. Their work won a Nobel Prize, and the core finding is brutally simple. Losses feel about twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. Let me put that into real numbers. If your $300,000 portfolio gains $30,000, you feel a normal amount of happy. Maybe you mention it to your spouse, maybe you don't. But if that same portfolio loses $30,000, you feel roughly twice as bad as the gain felt good. And here's the kicker. The bigger the absolute dollar amount, the more this asymmetry hits you in the gut. When you had $10,000 invested, a 20% drop was $2,000. Annoying, but survivable. When you have $300,000 invested, a 20% drop is $60,000. That's a car. That's a year of someone's salary. That's a down payment on a house, evaporating on your screen in real time. This is why so many investors freeze, or worse, bail, right around this account size. They've never emotionally rehearsed for losses this big. Their brain wasn't built to handle dollar swings of this magnitude without screaming at them to do something. Have you ever watched the market drop 5% in a single day and felt that sick feeling in your stomach? That's loss aversion firing in real time. And it gets louder the bigger your account gets, unless you actively rewire how you look at it. There's another researcher I want to introduce you to here, Hersh Shefrin, finance professor at Santa Clara University. He co-developed something called the Disposition Effect. It's the documented tendency for investors to sell their winners too early and hold their losers too long. Why? Because selling a winner feels like locking in a victory. Selling a loser feels like admitting you were wrong. So people do the exact opposite of what would actually make them rich. In phase 2, the disposition effect goes nuclear. Because now you have meaningful winners and meaningful losers, and every single one of them is screaming for your attention. And here's the part most people never figure out. The investors who actually make it through phase 2 and reach phase 3, they're not smarter than you. They're not more disciplined in some heroic way. They've just made one specific mental shift. They've stopped looking at their portfolio in dollars and started looking at it in shares. Let me explain what I mean. When the market drops 20%, a dollar-focused investor sees, I just lost $60,000. A share-focused investor sees, my 1247 shares are still 1247 shares, and now I can buy more of them at a discount. Same event, two completely different emotional experiences. One leads to panic selling, the other leads to calm accumulation. This is the single most important reframe in phase 2 investing. The number of shares you own is the only thing that actually compounds. The dollar value just tells you what someone's willing to pay you for them today. So, how do you actually use this? How do you make sure you're one of the people who reaches the autopilot phase instead of one of the millions who quit on the goal line? Here's the practical playbook. 4 steps, specific numbers, stuff you can actually do this week. Step 1, automate everything and then make it boring on purpose. Set up automatic contributions to your brokerage on the same day every month, ideally the day after you get paid. The amount matters less than the consistency. Even $500 a month added to a $300,000 portfolio compounding at 8% becomes an extra $470,000 over 25 years. But more importantly, automation removes the decision. And every decision you remove is one fewer chance for your loss-averse brain to sabotage you. Step 2, cap how often you check your account. I'm completely serious about this one. There's research from Richard Thaler, another Nobel laureate, showing that the more often investors check their portfolios, the worse their long-term returns get. He called it myopic loss aversion. Daily checking exposes you to roughly 100 negative days a year because the market is down on something like 46% of trading days. Monthly checking, you see maybe 4 or 5 down months a year. Yearly checking, you're down maybe 1 year in 4. Same portfolio, same returns, massively different emotional experience. My rule is simple. I check brokerage balances once a month on the first weekend of the month for about 15 minutes. That's it. I update a spreadsheet. I confirm contributions hit. I close the tab. If I had to name the single highest leverage habit I've built in the last decade, it's that one. Step 3, pre-decide your response to a crash before the crash happens. This is what professional pilots do. They don't figure out how to handle engine failure during engine failure. They have a checklist memorized cold. You need the same thing. Write down on paper what you will do if your portfolio drops 20%, 30%, and 40%. My answer for all 3 is the same. I do nothing. I do not sell. I do not pause contributions. If I have extra cash, I buy more. That's the entire plan. The reason this works is that you're making the decision when your prefrontal cortex is online, not when your amygdala is hijacking you mid-crash. Quick reality check. Since 1928, the S&P 500 has had a drawdown of 20% or more roughly every 4 to 5 years, a 30% drawdown about every 7 to 10 years, a 40% plus drawdown about every 15 to 20 years. These aren't black swan events. They are the entry fee. If you can't sit through them, you don't get the long-term return. Period. Step 4, track shares accumulated, not dollar value. This is the share counting reframe in practice. Open a simple spreadsheet. List every fund or stock you own. Track the share count over time. Watch that number only go up. Because here's the thing, your dollar value will swing wildly. Up 15% one year, down 22% the next. Your share count, if you keep contributing, only ever moves in one direction, up. When the market drops 30%, your dollar value drops with it. Your share count, it actually accelerates upward because your same monthly contribution is now buying more shares at a discount. This single tracking change has done more for my investing psychology than any book I've ever read. Let me put it all together with a specific example because I want this to feel concrete. Picture two investors. Both have $300,000 invested today. Both contribute $1,000 a month going forward. Both invest in the same broad market index fund returning roughly 8% per year long term. Investor A is what I'll call the dollar watcher. She checks her account daily. When the market drops 25%, she panics, sells half her position to preserve what's left, and waits to get back in when things calm down. She gets back in 14 months later, after the market has already recovered. She does this kind of move twice over 25 years. Investor B is the share counter. He checks once a month. When the market drops 25%, he doesn't even adjust his contributions. He just keeps buying. Same fund, same amount, every single month. After 25 years, Investor B has roughly $2.3 million. Investor A has about $1.1 million. Same starting capital, same monthly contribution, same fund. The only difference between a $1.2 million gap is behavior. That's not a hypothetical. That's the actual gap that the Vanguard and Thaler studies have been measuring for decades. Behavior is the entire game in phase 2. So let's tie this all together. Compound growth happens in 3 phases. The grind from $0 to $100,000, the awkward middle from $100,000 to $500,000, and the autopilot phase that takes you to 7 and 8 figures. Almost everyone quits during phase 2 because that's where loss aversion gets loudest and dollar swings get violent. The mechanism is that your brain feels losses about twice as hard as gains, and the disposition effect tricks you into selling winners and holding losers. Phase 2 is where these biases do their maximum damage because the dollar amounts finally feel real. The fix is 4 steps. Automate contributions so you never decide. Check your account monthly, not daily. Pre-write your crash response before the crash happens. And track shares accumulated, not dollar value, because shares are the only thing that actually compound. Here's the truth I want you to leave with. The hardest part of getting rich in the market isn't picking the right fund. It isn't timing anything. It isn't even saving aggressively, although that helps. The hardest part is sitting still long enough for the math to work on you. $300,000 becomes $2 million if you do nothing. $300,000 becomes $700,000 if you panic sell once at the wrong moment. The gap between those two outcomes is not skill, it's stillness. If this changed how you think about your own portfolio, hit subscribe. I make videos like this every week, and the next one is about the specific tax move that can save phase 2 investors over $40,000 if they make it before age 50. You don't want to miss that one. I'm Joe. Keep it boring, keep buying. I'll see you next week.